the correct answer! You've done it! Okay, so we have journal 3, and we have journal 3's spare journal, and then spare journal, and then the spare journal, spare journal, but I actually had a 5th one for the winner of the cipher. And then I went ahead and decorated the first 2 pages just for you. Now, let's go into the cipher. So the clue was to find the bird. And the bird was actually the logo of the company who makes these rings. And so once you found the ring, the cipher would be extremely easy to decipher. We go with ISALEXWATCHING. And the code turned out to be, "Is Alex watching?" I also printed out some prototype stickers that I'm working on. Thank you for participating, and good luck on the next one. I'm not going to be selling the stickers anytime soon, just so you know. I think I lost my paper clip. That's not good. That paper clip holds this channel together. Well, I'm just going to have to start without the paper clip. Let's go ahead and start the new page. Found it. Good thing I didn't overreact. And now that we have it, let's go ahead and pin the page down. I'm going to use our spare journal to prop up the page. I don't actually need it. So we're going to start off with just a few sketches here, and it's just going to be 2 large trees with a bunch of little ones in the center. Here I'm just going to be mixing up my gouache paint and making a nice little yellow-brown color. Now I'm just going to use very little here and mostly use the water to spread that around. Forgot to get clean water. Now it doesn't really matter if you have clean water or not, I just prefer to start with clean water. I'm going to add a few splatters here and there. Now here I'm going to be doing a couple layers. The yellow might seem a little strange, but once you add another color on top, you'll get a nice little variation of browns. That way nothing's a solid color and you get a little texture going on. So here just going to be mixing up a darker brown and just going to go right over that yellow. So once I add that darker brown, you can already see a little bit how that yellow is peeking through. And very similarly, you can see on top just a little bit of red peeking through that brown. So while I wait for that to dry, I'm going to go ahead and move on to this white acrylic. So I'm just going to water it down a little bit and just start going over all those trees. Now this white is going to dry a lot lighter, so don't worry if it looks a little too strong right now. And going back to my reference, the center of the page is going to be a little bit darker than the rest, and it's just really subtle. And the nice thing about gouache paint is it's very forgiving. You can see here I added too much color, and I can easily get rid of some of it. So I'm just going to clean up my station a little bit, and then we're going to move on to those art pens. I'm going to put away the gouache paints for now, and we'll come back to this in a little bit. And as far as those art pens, I prefer to use a 08. It's definitely on the thicker side, but it's kind of easier to use. So let's go ahead and start outlining the leaves on the left tree. Feels like I'm making no progress. And this is definitely going to be a tedious drawing, so just kind of bear with it. Well, at least that's one. Now let's go ahead and move on to the one on the right. Now make sure to include thicker lines at random points. This will just give the drawing a little extra weight and make it a little more interesting to look at. If you keep the same line weight throughout the whole drawing, you end up having a much more flatter drawing. So that's something I would personally avoid. Now going back to the paint, we're going to go ahead and touch up anything that we may have lost. Now here I'm going to be going for a much more darker brown, so I'm going to be mixing black in with this brown this time. And this is just so I can separate that background a little bit more than the actual official journal. I think this will just make it a little easier to read. And it might seem a little dark right now, but don't forget that color is going to lighten up. And then here I'm just going to be adding a little cross hatching to the drawing, just so the drawing has a little more to look at. Now for the title of this page, I'm going to go with the number 1 pen, and this will just give a really nice brushstroke look. And make sure the lid is on. I've had these pens dry out on me a couple times. Now because I made these trees extremely close to one another, I'm going to have to make sure I write extra small just so everything fits. Let's go ahead and add in that cipher, and let's darken up that page a little bit more, just so it doesn't look so nice. Now let's go ahead and move on to the UV part. And I'm just going to turn off a couple lights here, just so I can see it a little easier. Now I shouldn't have issue with the UV because I didn't use any of the coffee. The only real issue I'm running into is that the pen is a little on the thick side, so it's a little hard to squeeze in those words. Other than that, I think it came out pretty nice. Words are a little blurry, but you get the idea. Do you want to be in the video? Yeah. Yeah, sure, why not? Okay, this should only take like 20 minutes. I've been working on this for like 3 hours! Let's go ahead and lock down our page, just so it doesn't flip over on us. I'm going to attempt to do something different here. I'm going to go ahead and make this little paper guard, and I'm going to tape that down into place. And behind the page we're going to be drawing on, I'm going to add another sheet of paper. Now I'm doing this because I'm going to be trying to use this airbrush machine. I've had this sitting around and I can never get this thing to work. But today sounds like a good day to try to learn how to use it. I'm going to start by watering down some acrylic. The pink seems like a strange choice, but trust me. Gonna use a little eyedropper just to grab some of the paint, just so I don't accidentally spill anything. Gonna add that to the airbrush machine, gonna lock it into place. Go ahead and turn it on, and immediately I realize it's really light, it's too watery. The color doesn't really show up. So I'm gonna go ahead and darken it up by adding a little more acrylic. So after we're done mixing that, let's go ahead and add it again to the machine. That again, it's not really showing up all that well. So my solution is I probably just need more paint. So I add a couple colors to the water in hopes that it'll show up a little bit better on the page. And you think third time would be the charm, but then I'm running into the issue that the paint won't come out. Now I tried doing a deep clean on this, but I'm really unfamiliar with an airbrush machine. So I'm just kind of at random moving settings around in hopes that some paint will come out. But as you can see here, I'm having no luck. And I have no idea what this thing does, but maybe that'll fix it? Here I think the issue is just I need more paint into the machine, but I'm running into the same problem where barely any paint is coming out. And at this point, I'm making no progress. This is why I don't like airbrush machines. They never work, but all reliable does. And unfortunately, I didn't get it to work. It'll just have to be something else that I learned later down. I've only ever got it to work once. This cup clean? So I'm trying not to waste cups, so I'm just kind of reusing them over and over. There's a lot of mystery liquid in these things. So here I'm just using a fan brush with just a couple different acrylic paints. So after I added that black, I'm gonna go ahead and make this little mucky brown color just to soften down that galaxy a bit. Because right now it is really harsh against this page. And the goal is to have this really soft, subtle transition into that galaxy. So using some acrylic and a generous amount of water, we're gonna try to push back that starry system a little bit. And to push it back even further, I'm gonna use a solid white, and this is gonna mix in a little bit with that brown. It's not gonna be entirely noticeable until after I weather the page. That's when a lot of these colors will pop up against each other. Gonna darken up a few spots here and there, and then afterwards I'm gonna weather the rest of the page. And because gouache paint does not go over any acrylic, I'm going to be adding an additional layer of a light brown acrylic, just so I have a much more organic looking color on this page. Afterwards, that same brown, I'm gonna water it down and just go over a couple extra spots to further soften up this drawing. Afterwards, I'm going to take this outside, and using some white spray paint, I'm going to spray down my finger, and using a flicking motion, I'm going to get a really random starry system. Once we let that dry for a second, we can come back in and darken up a few of these stars, and this will just give you a little bit of depth, just so it doesn't look too flat. After we darken up a few of those stars, we're going to come in and add a little bit of shine to a few stars at random. This will just give a variety of things to look at. Afterwards, we're going to draw in some of those shooting stars. And they're not necessarily shooting stars, it's more like a haze, but I'm going to call them shooting stars. And again, this is more just to add a little bit of texture to that page. Next up, we're going to go ahead and write out all the words. And as usual, I'm just going to go right through it. And once I finished up with the black text, let's go ahead and come back around with the red. And this is just saying that he should burn the page after he's done with it. And just so that red doesn't look too brand new, just a little bit of water just to smudge it a bit. And now that we got the page done, let's go ahead and start working on that UV. Now it's going to be the infamous axolotl, and I'm going to try my best to try to catch it on camera, but it is difficult to see. It's definitely much easier to see it in real life. And I might have gone a little overboard with that starry system, but that's kind of debatable, because I really like it. Okay, don't blink, I'm going to drop random lore. Book 1 was made in 2015 to 2016, Book 2 was made in 2023, and Book 3 was made in 2023 to 2024. And the only one still in my possession is Book 1. Oh, that's not good. That's not part of the skit. That's not a joke. Alright, let's start off with the spare journal, and we're going to be drawing a new Polaroid today. Let's go ahead and pin down the page, and let's start drawing Mothman. Now, we don't need anything too crazy, we just need a base outline, because we are going to be corroding the image anyway, so just something nice, and then we'll throw a filter on it, just to make it look a little extra creepy. Let's go ahead and print it out, and let's take it over to the cutting board. Let's go ahead and cut it down to size, And now that it's cut down to size, let's go ahead and put away our cutting board. And let's take out that old coffee that we have. Let's bring it back to life with just a little bit of water, and then go ahead and use something to stir it up, and I'm just going to use this fan brush right here. But you can use anything, honestly. Let's go ahead and dip in our Polaroid, and we're just going to let that sit for a little bit. After a while, we're going to go ahead and take it out, and I'm just going to rest it right here. No, it's stuck. You know, at this point, this coffee's giving me a really hard time with everything. I really need to find an alternative solution to this. But I was lucky this time, I was able to get it off. But I was fully expecting just to print a brand new one. And let's go ahead and wrinkle up this image just a little bit. And then after that, we can go ahead and just start making some of those tears, mix up some coffee, and then we can add that to the Polaroid. Just to add a little extra weathering, because I didn't fully get what I wanted. Go ahead and open up the main journal. Let's go ahead and crease the paper, pin down the page, and then using that spare journal just to prop up the page. Let's go ahead and start off with a little sketch. And then once we got that down, we can start weathering the page. Now I want to emphasize on this page that light pole right there. So I kind of want to weather around it and just leave that general area significantly brighter than the rest. That way we can make these shadows look really nice. And then I'm going to use a scrap piece of paper just so I don't accidentally get paint on the previous page. Let's go ahead and add in all the shadows. I'm going to go ahead and put this away for a second. And we'll come back to this in just a moment. I just can't seem to get that weathering right, so I'm just going to add a little bit more to this. And with this last layer, it should come out right. Afterwards, we're going to go ahead and start outlining everything. This drawing does look partially sketched in, so the creature itself, it looks like it's really sketched out, but the guy on the left side looks like he was actually painted. So we're going to be doing a mixture of the two, where one half is going to be a little more sketchy than the other side. And then using similar elements like the shadows, we can make the drawing look like one cohesive drawing instead of two separate ones. Here I'm just going to be adding a little extra highlights just to really emphasize the lighting. Let's go ahead and switch over to some art pens, and this is just so I can add some cross-hatching here. Let's go ahead and write out the title here, and using a pencil, I can pre-sketch where those words are going to be, that way I have a much easier time placing down those words. Now I'm actually pretty happy that this happened right here. I accidentally wrote part of the wrong sentence here, and someone asked, what is my plan if I accidentally mess up? Well, the simple answer is you just weather around it. The beauty of this project is nothing looks perfect, so it's extremely easy to hide all your mistakes. So let's go ahead and move over to the UV paint, and in this part, he's actually talking about how toxic his invisible ink is. Now, Mothman is supposed to be outlined with UV paint, and I had a feeling it wasn't going to take it all just because it's soaked in coffee. But I think it's alright. I'm not too worried about it. It's more the message underneath it that I was more worried about. And that shows up pretty well. At least in real life, you know. Camera doesn't really catch anything. And it probably doesn't help that I'm just recording on my phone. In the future, I might get a real camera and actually record this properly. But for now, this will have to do. So you want more lore on my books. Okay, I have one. So the second book was completed in 2024. But that's actually the second version. I never completed the first one. I only got about 50 drawings in before I gave up. Also, I had an axolotl named Onion. I completely forgot the code in the last video. I'm just gonna include 2 of them this time. Alright, using our spare journal, we're gonna use this as a hand rest, and we can start sketching out the little outhouse. Let's place down the main title of the page, some of the beard cubes on top, and we're ready to start painting. Since this one's going to be heavily focused on lighting, we're going to be adding a lot of white acrylic. Now it may seem like it's not really doing much since it lightens up a lot, but it's all about adding small layers. It's easy to add layers, it's difficult to remove them. And all those layers of acrylic will affect how that gouache paint washes over the page. You'll get a much more lighter effect where all that acrylic is sitting. Next off, let's go ahead and start adding in that little spiral, and then let's start adding all the dark shadows. Let's go ahead and sharpen up some of the lines down here, and let's start coloring out the outhouse. Now I'm going to be using more of a red-brown here just to separate it from that really dark background. And I'm just going to go take it to dry it real quick, and I'm just using a regular hair dryer for this. That's just so I can dry the page a lot faster instead of waiting for it to dry naturally. This will be the difference between 20 minutes of drying compared to roughly around 2 minutes drying. Now there is some give and take when using a hairdryer to dry the page. If you let the page dry naturally, a lot of that ink can spread out and give you much more even coverage, but if you force the page to dry quicker, you'll have much harsher dry lines. So feel free to use that technique however you need to. Let's go ahead and add a few gradients to that outhouse, just to have a few extra colors in there. Now here I'm just going to go and start working on those mustaches, and there's not too much happening with them. Looks like just a solid color, a little bit of shadow, and mostly highlights. Let's go ahead and darken up some of those symbols, and on this page it looks like they're like a dark gray, so using some gouache paint, let's go ahead and darken up those symbols. Change in symbol colors is probably just another hidden message, so if anyone knows what that message is, I'd love to know what it is. Let me go ahead and move this plate out of the way. You know, I bought this dish at Goodwill. And this will just give us a little extra room to move around. And then using a 08 pen, let's go ahead and outline all the artwork. And again, make sure to include different variations of line weight. Now I try my best for the camera just to keep my drawing in the same position, but don't be afraid to move that sketchbook around. Typically most artists have one good angle, so don't be afraid to move the sketchbook around as you need. Let's go ahead and put away my art pens just for now, and let's bring back that gouache paint. It's much easier to see what's missing once you've outlined everything. At that point it becomes much more apparent which part of the drawing is missing some paint. Let's go ahead and touch up any lines that got lost. because sometimes when you add a little bit of gouache paint, it kind of goes over the line work, and the lines don't look as crispy as they should. Now, if you're okay with that, by all means go with that route, but I like to make sure that my outlines are nice and dark all the way through. That's just my preference. Let's go ahead and add that ruler and that little line going underneath the mustaches, and then I can go ahead and darken up the titles, and then write out the whole message. And the page is just talking about those mustaches, and then how there's a portal inside that outhouse. And I'm going to add a little bit of extra weathering just because the page looks a little too nice for my taste. And it does look a little strong, but again, all this is going to lighten up afterwards. So don't get discouraged to add a lot of paint to the page. As time goes on, you'll get a much better feel for how much that paint's going to lighten up, and you'll get much more comfortable with it. And again, gouache paint is very forgiving. Adding just a little bit of water, you can easily remove what you don't like. Here, just doing a few more touch-ups. Now right here is a good example to show just how much that gouache paint is lightening up. And it's almost as if I didn't add it. It's such a small opacity change. But in my opinion, it really does add up over time. Now let's go ahead and move over to the UV paint. And I was really surprised just how bright the UV showed up on this page. The only conclusion I can come to is that all that white acrylic just really enhanced it. So the UV on this page is absurdly strong. But I like it. Looks good. Really adds that glowy effect. So I probably have way too many murals in my house, and I actually painted Onion in this corner right here. But before we had Onion, we had Wilson. Don't try this at home. No, I'm serious. Don't try this at home. Alright, let's go ahead and get ready for the next page. Let's go ahead and crease the paper, and let's go ahead and pin that down. Let's go ahead and grab our spare journal just to prop up the page, and let's go ahead and start the sketch. Now it's going to be two major sketches this time. It's going to be a little campfire and this little shadowy figure. Let's go ahead and grab my gouache paint. Now I really recommend that you use something ceramic because they clean extremely easily. So as long as you don't drop it, it'll last basically forever. Or just use whatever you can find. I was using the top of a spray paint can lid for a while, so anything honestly works. Now using my spatula, let's go ahead and grab a little extra white, put it on top of that lid. I really hope that's mine. So we're going to heavily focus on that little fire sketch right there, because that bottom one's just going to be a solid black. Now to get fire, you want to make sure it's really spontaneous looking. And honestly, this brush has been bothering me for like a week. Hang on. Don't be scared to modify your brushes. I've had this one for like 2 years. Now for the fire sketch, we're going to have to build up multiple layers. So we're going to go back and forth on these dark colors, light colors, dark colors, until we get a really nice, crazy look to it. You can also go down the route of having it more illustrated looking. And that just means having like those sharper lines. Personally, I don't want to go that route. So I'm going to be adding a lot of spontaneous colors back and forth. And I do have one other idea that I want to try out. Might be a bad idea, but we'll see. So right now I'm just going to heavily focus on that background, making it really dark, little scrap paper to protect the previous page. And then while I'm working on that background, I'm going to go ahead and weather the page as well. This will just help keep that page really smooth looking. And so back here again, we're going to go back and forth, adding some white again. And you're going to see me go over this maybe 3 or 4 times. And this will really add some depth to that fire. Right here, just adding some highlights to the logs. This will make much more sense once everything's darkened up. You almost want the page to look like it's glowing itself. So you're going to have to take a lot of colors to the extreme. Right here, adding a little bit of shadowing. After that, we're going to go ahead and work on this guy down here. And this is a fairly simple one. It's just like a little shadow. And all you have to do is just add a little bit of white acrylic to those teeth. This will just help make it pop a little more off the page. You can leave it blank as well, but I like adding that little highlight to it. Right here, gonna add a little shadow to the feet, and it's best to do it before outlining everything. That way that shadow doesn't accidentally smudge the black. Now that we colored everything in with the pen, now we can go over it a second time with a little bit of black gouache paint, and we're not gonna fill it in 100%. We're gonna wanna leave some of those little sketch lines in the background. That way it'll give more of an illusion of it being drawn on the fly, because I can't imagine this character sitting still. This brush has seen some better days. Now that that campfire dried for a little bit, let's go ahead and draw in the eyes. And while that dries, let's go ahead and add a little bit of white highlights to this character. And let's go ahead and mess up the outline a little bit. That way we get a really messy look. And again, we want this all to look really sketched out. So I'm going to be using a pen for the majority of this. I'm going to use my art pens, but only for a little bit of cross hatching. I don't want to use them for any of the outlines here. That way the drawings will look a little more crazier on this page. Using my regular pen, let's go ahead and add some really harsh sketch lines to those shadows. And then after that, we can continue to try to add in some of those highlights. Now this is going to be really tedious, but it is going to be worth it in the end. Adding some harsh yellows and then going over it again with some whites until you find a balance that you like. Just real quick, just between you and me, you and Berto, be really careful while using fire. This stuff can be extremely dangerous. And make sure you have parental supervision if you're underage. because fire can be extremely random and very likely to damage your drawing. So just be ready to fix any problems that might happen. Well, that's not good. So just be really careful, alright? And you'll see for doing this, I actually did damage my drawing too. So let's go ahead and start fixing that. Could have sworn my paperclip was here. Huh. I guess I'll just hold the paper down. It's not ideal, but I guess. So the first part of patching this up, we're going to go ahead and go over with the white acrylic. And this is just so I can see that drawing a little easier. Next off, we're going to add a piece of tape because this page is now extremely brittle and is already starting to fall apart. After that, we're going to re-outline the design. You ever see this trick? Tape palette. Now using some acrylic, I'm going to go ahead and hide that tape because in my case, this is not an ideal placement for it. You know, that's not too bad. But if we can do a little bit better, let's add some color back to this page. But before we start with that, I'm going to need my paperclip. There you are. Because holding the page is not ideal, honestly. And to bring some color back into that page, I'm just going to be using a little bit of orange and brown and blending those two colors on top of each other. Not too bad. Let's go ahead and keep moving on. One of the most important things you can do as an artist is learn how to adapt, because there's going to be a lot of mistakes that happen, especially when you're working on a larger project. So don't strive for any perfection, try to strive to have solutions to fix any problems that you may run into. So here, just finishing off the words, and then adding any little distress that I may have missed. And I really like how this drawing came out, and I like that burn mark on the top corner. Not everyone's going to like that choice, but I like it. Yeah, no, that's a tattoo. That doesn't come off. Also, my next upload might take a few days. For hitting 10,000, I want to make the next journal. Can you guess which one it is? Can you do a Q&A? Yeah, I can do that. Look, I have the knowledge of at least 3 goldfish. First question. Where do you find the pages? I actually have a standard edition just off camera, but I'm hoping to get a special edition in the future. Question 2. Can you review all the pages? Yeah, there's currently about, I think 18 pages done. 17 if you don't count the one in this video. Where did you learn how to sketch, draw, paint? So I have had a few teachers. None of them actually sat down with me and showed me how to do anything, but they were the ones who reviewed all my stuff. So I learned how to paint with most mediums, how to 3D model, and how to animate in 2D and 3D space, as well as various editing techniques. The ego side of me wants to say I'm self-taught, but that's probably not true. Can you do more pages per video? So the reason I only do 1, probably 2 at the most, per video, it's because this is a really long-term project. And for me personally, it's a bit difficult to try to tackle multiple pages. It reminds me of this image right here. How many parts do you think this series is going to get? If I'm lucky, probably like 250. The most I've had is up to 100. I really love all the random commentary. Thank you, it's my favorite part to do! Did you ever get the invisible ink off your hands? Or is it still there? It's part of my character now. It did, it washed off after 2 days. How many times is he going to say organic? It's my favorite word. Will you make Journal 2 for 50k likes? So Journal 1 was made to celebrate hitting 10k subscribers, and because materials are expensive, I'm trying to delay it a little bit for Journal 2, so I'm thinking around 50,000 subscribers. Then I'll go ahead and make Journal 2. Hopefully that gives me plenty of time to gather some extra cash. How to paint leather. Famous words from a random video.
How to paint leather. A step-by-step guide. Would you believe it's actually just me through a filter?
Where did you find the photos to do the black light? So you're probably not going to like this answer, but I'm actually just Googling it as I go. It's a bit chaotic, but it's the way I'm doing it. This one isn't actually a question, I just really like the idea. So I'm just going to add it here just so I don't forget it. He can make any fictional item come to real life. Thank you, I appreciate that. Eventually I'll finish Journal 3, and the next project I have in mind is actually the Thievius Raccoonus from Sly Cooper. So how did you come up with your username / profile picture? So I've gone through a few designs, this is the current one I'm using. And so it's kind of a silly reason, but I actually made it a little bird because everyone pronounces my name Berto with a hard T. It's actually pronounced Berto, which I get it's not spelled that way, but it's kind of too late. And so this is actually the reference I used. I'm not entirely sure what type of bird this is. I've seen it be called a couple things, but I can definitely see why people think it's a chicken. But it's a little bird in hopes that someone would get the reference Berto. As for the username, so my name's Berto, not my legal name, but it's what I go by. My buddy wanted me to get onto social media, and he's actually the one who came up with the forever part at the end. And when I jumped onto TikTok, that was already taken, so then that's where the number 4 came from. Will I be continuing Journal 3? Yes, but I will be taking little breaks, and my breaks are just random little projects I do on the side, but Journal 3 is the long-term project. How do I print the Polaroids? So I'm just taking a picture of it with my phone and then sending it over to the printer. And on my phone, I am adding an extra little filter to make it look dirtier. What paper am I using for the Polaroids? So I just picked it up at Fry's, but here's the exact paper I'm using. Are you going to be making the missing pages from the Book of Bill? I am, but just a handful of them, just so the journal doesn't get too bulky. But I'll be adding them as loose papers. Are you really going to be doing all 288 pages? I'm definitely going to try my best. Is your real name Berto? There's a couple missing letters, but kind of. It's the back half of my name. I have an extremely common name, so my buddies just kind of came up with a nickname just to differentiate me from everyone else. What kind of coffee did you use to make the paper? So I'm just using this instant coffee right here. It's pretty cheap. You can get an entire container for like $5. Have you read, seen, investigated the Book of Bill? Actually, I have not. I've seen a little bit of it. The first time I saw it was in the store right next to my Journal 3, but I was so excited to buy the Journal 3 that I glazed right over the Book of Bill. But I have seen a few videos here and there about it, but I'm really hoping to read into it myself. Where did you get your monocle? I got everything off of Amazon. I don't have links, but I do have old screenshots on my phone. Here's the journal that I got, Snowman Crafts. It's an 8x6 journal, similar to this. I just haven't looked it up again, so I don't have any of the links. What kind of drawing materials are you using? So I'm mostly using gouache paint, and this is the set that I'm using. It is a bit on the pricey side. What kind of pens am I using? So for the drawing parts, I'm just using regular art pens, and then the writing, I'm just using this uni pen. So whenever I draw, my hands always rest on the page, and I end up getting a lot of lead on my hands, and it makes the drawing look a little faded. Any tips? Yeah, so I recommend that you add a piece of paper underneath your hand, but with time, I recommend you practice keeping your hand elevated a little bit. What page are you most excited for? Well, I'm actually pretty excited about doing the zombie page. No particular reason, just want to do it. My question, does it have the right amount of pages, and will you be doing the Dipper and Mabel parts? Yes, I'm going to try to add everything from the original Journal 3. What kind of phone do you have? So I record everything on my phone, and so I'm using an S23. And the editing program I'm using is a free one. It's called CapCut. It's pretty good, actually. What is the story behind this channel, and why did you create it? And what did you do before? For the last 2 or 3 years, I was primarily on TikTok, and that's where I made book 2 and book 3. And that's where I was just taking a bunch of suggestions and then drawing. And I would always have some type of gimmick with those drawings. For example, book 2 was me saying that I was ruining the book. And then book 3, I was claiming to teach you how to draw while making the most ridiculous doodles. And so I eventually lost passion for that, and I just wanted to try something else. I'm going to assume this is referring to how long it takes me to do a single page. And painting a single page is roughly around 1 to 2.5 hours. They do take quite a bit of time. So this one is in reference to what type of tape I should be using. And they're suggesting that I should use a clear tape, but the reason I use the cloudy tape is because if you look at the reference in Journal 3, it does look kind of cloudy, so that is intentional. What are the products I'm using for my UV paint? So I'm using mostly primarily that Direct Glow product, but here's the pen that I'm also using as well. But I don't recommend it. It's an okay product. That's just a handful of questions that I saw. If you want to ask more questions, by all means, I'm just going to grab them off of this video and add them to the next one. So here's some bonus content from my logo, from start to finish. And if you notice, the eyes were supposed to be blue at one point, but I just completely forgot about it when I was coloring it. Also, here's the completed cipher. And these are the 2 clues to figure it out. Number 1, something on my desk doesn't belong. Number 2, the answer is in every video. Good luck figuring it out. You know, I didn't think that'd work. It's an invisible wizard! I'm going to start showing this page just so you can see what I'm working on today. Will you ever write anything in Journal 1? I'm probably just going to do the portal page. Yeah, if you want, I can actually just do this for every video. It's going to progressively get longer and longer each time. How many pages did your journal come with? That's a good question. This question is in reference to the cipher. No, it is not the quill. The quill belongs on the table. Do I have any other channels? No, just this one. I could do like a video game channel, but I'm not really all that good, so I'd probably be playing the same level over and over. I can't imagine that being entertaining. Real quick before I forget to add it into the video. For the invisible wizard, I'm actually just going to make a little cutout for him, and I'm not going to be weathering the page where the wizard's going to be sitting because I really need that invisible ink to actually show, since this page heavily relies on that. And to keep it in place, I'm going to be using painter's tape. That way when I peel it off, it doesn't rip the page at all. He's lying, the page did rip. And I'm mostly going to be using acrylic for the weathering, because I do know the UV paint does show up on that. But for the corners, I'm going to be adding a little gouache paint. Can you show us any animations you made? It's been quite a while since I made one, but I do have this blink animation I did for the cipher at the beginning of the video. I don't really have the equipment that I did in school to animate anything. I just used the free app on my phone for this one. I'm sure you can make more complex things with it, but I just made a simple 4-drawing blink animation with this one. It's nothing too complicated. What pens or markers are you going to use for the Mabel pages? So I could go the route of getting the really nice color pencils, because it looks like color pencils to me the way it's drawn out. But I'm still debating if I should just get that cheap Crayola set, because what are the odds that Mabel has a really nice set of color pencils? But I also don't want to ruin this journal with cheap drawings. If you were to make a replica from a cartoon, something that's not a book, what would it be? Now it's ironic that he has a Sonic profile picture, because I just saw someone on TikTok make these Sonic soap shoes, and let me tell you, I really want to make those too now. But I don't want to stray away too much from the journal, so I'm going to do a couple more pages before I decide to make them. It also involves using a lot of foam, and I'm not really familiar with that one, so it's going to be a first time for me too. Any tips for writing cursive, or do you just know from the back of your head? You know, I remember hearing that I was the last group of kids that learned how to write cursive in school. So it does just seem a little strange to me that it's not taught in school anymore. It really just doesn't make sense to me. But the way I'm getting my version of Ford's handwriting is I'm keeping my journal really slanted, so it almost looks italicized. What is my favorite episode from Gravity Falls? So I really like that Scarioki episode. I hope I'm saying that right. And the reason I like it is because that's when we find out Stan actually is seeing all the weirdness and just pretending like he doesn't. It's a good episode. Will the coffee bowl ever expire? I've noticed two things. One, it still hasn't developed any mold. And two, it doesn't have any weird smells coming from it. What do you think will be the most difficult page? So I personally think the My Muse Was a Monster page is going to give me the hardest time. For a couple reasons. One, the page is going to be heavily inked, and the pages are already really thin to begin with. And two, because there's going to be so much ink, it's possible it's going to bleed over to the previous page and the page afterwards. So I'm more wondering if I should do that page before the prior page in case it does bleed over like that. Because if it's already damaged, I can always just add a little bit of white acrylic, but it's going to be more difficult to fix it if the drawing's already there, if that makes any sense. Will I ever add myself to the journal? You know, that's not a bad idea. Kind of like a final page type of thing. But do you think that would ruin the journal? I'm not sure. And also, would I make myself a cartoon or would I make it hyper realistic? So you're doing Athevius Raccoonus from Sly Cooper. Would you ever consider doing other book projects like The Rules from Fairly Odd Parents? I definitely wouldn't be opposed to the idea. Since you've mentioned it before, what's your degree in? So I have a bachelor's in media arts and animation. And the school had teachers that worked on some pretty big projects. One teacher worked on the movie Anastasia, hope I'm saying that right, and Spirit, that movie about the horse. And we had another teacher that actually filmed the original Star Trek. I can't tell if it's the hair tie or the candlestick. No, the candlestick is supposed to be there, and that's not a hair tie, it's a ring. Is it the clock on top of your desk? It's actually a compass, but no, the compass is supposed to be there. You'll have to rewatch the show to see what's not supposed to be on this table. And that's the page of the...
Hey, hang on, I almost forgot the dotted lines.
Does the book smell like coffee? It kind of smells moldy and wet. Probably shouldn't have those combination of words together. Also, check it out. The Invisible Wizard came out perfect. The dotted lines are a little off, but whatever. It's close enough. So far, you're the closest person to figure it out, but not quite. The third clue is the cipher isn't part of the show, but you can find the answer inside the show. I heard copper is really good for arthritis.
Great! My fingers still hurt and now they're green!
So not that many, but I still have a few lingering questions. Question 1. What are you going to do with the journals when you finish them? Will you keep them or will you give them to a fan or a friend? So there's a couple things I want to do. Either 1, go find Alex first and give him the journals. 2, possibly go hide them somewhere and have someone find it. Or 3, to make it the most accurate, possibly give it the old Bill Cipher treatment. But I don't know if I'd have the heart to actually do that one. Are you thinking of making a non-damaged version? Actually, I think that'd be really cool to do, to have like a non-damaged version of Journal 3. I don't think it would be as interesting to look at though. I feel like having all those damaged pieces is what makes it look really appealing to look at. But it would look a lot more show accurate, having like that vibrant red and the really nice golds. If the idea gets more traction, I'll think about it. I challenge you to say hello Kevin in Spanish. Okay, yeah, I can do that. Hello Kevin in Spanish. Who is your favorite character? Now I'm not sure if you're referring to like as an all-time. An all-time it'd be Sonic from Sonic Adventure 2. I have a weird obsession with Sonic. I have it painted multiple times in my house. Here's the last one I've painted. Now if you're referring to GravityFalls, then it'd be Rumble McSkirmish. I used to play a lot of Street Fighter with my brother growing up, so it's nice to see the reference. I know Berto Forever's real name. It's Stanford Pines. Yep, you got me. I've actually seen quite a few guesses. I've seen Gilberto, I've seen Roberto, I've seen Alberto. That's the one I see the most. I've even seen someone guess Christopher, which I can kind of see, but it's definitely not Christopher. What is your least favorite episode of Gravity Falls? It's the bottomless pit episode, not my favorite. Do you think this project will take a year to finish? You know, originally I thought it was going to take roughly around a year or so.
I knew I forgot something.
But at my current rate, I'm genuinely concerned it might take longer. I saw the notebook that you're using on Amazon. It says it has 200 pages, but Journal 3 has 288 pages. How do you plan on fitting an extra 88 pages?
Is that how many pages it has?
That's definitely a good question. That's definitely a problem for future Berto. Honestly, it would be entertaining to see you play Hollow Knight. I've actually played Hollow Knight, but I never 100% at the game. I did get a couple different endings, and I've gotten most of the charms, but I'll just openly admit that I was on this game for multiple months on end. But I am excited to see when Silksong comes out. But realistically, by the time that comes out, I had to finish already like 10 more journals. I saw a few responses like this, saying that the last page that I should make about myself should be like something in blacklight. That way it doesn't clash with the actual journal, but I can still include myself in it. I like the idea. I've also seen someone say that I should have like a sticky note type of like, you know, the one of those Polaroids, and have that as myself. That way it's still attached to the book, but it can always be removed. I'll definitely have to mess with some of the ideas when I get a little closer to finishing it. Oh, one of the coolest things I've seen is I've seen someone actually make a little YouTube short about me. I wish I understood what they were saying. I think it's in Portuguese. It sounds positive, or at least I hope so. I speak Spanish, and so I can kind of hear some of the words that are being said, but like I catch every other word. So if someone would do me the solid and translate that for me, I'd really appreciate it. It's from this user right here, in case anyone's wondering. Another really good find recently are these little UV party favored pens. Now I've been trying to find a really good pen and none of them have come out well. Either the writing comes out too thick or it just doesn't show up at all. But this one right here, the really cheap ones, the one meant for children, this is the first one that I've seen that actually works. The letters are extremely visible, it glows really well. I don't know if it washes off, but I was able to even fix a previous page. That's how well this one worked. So I do recommend it. All the items are very intentional. So the background I did is actually from Gideon's flashback where he's talking about the author. Of course it's supposed to be Journal 2, but we'll just ignore that little detail. But the only thing that's not part of that scene is this ring right here. And so now that you figured that out, here's your last clue. Find the bird. Once you find it, you'll be able to decode the message. Good luck. I'm not the only one seeing that, right?
Now, I'm pretty sure that lamp is looking at me.
So I don't have enough questions to actually do another Q&A. So I think I'm just going to let them build up for a little bit. And once I get enough questions, I'll do another Q&A video. Until then, I'm just going to go back to the regular style. And we're going to go ahead and pin this page. And that'll just help keep the paper in place. Let's go ahead and grab that spare journal just to prop up the page. And now we should be ready to draw. So let's go ahead and start sketching out some of the guidelines. This will just make it a little bit easier for me when I'm painting everything. I do sometimes lose some of those guidelines when I'm painting, especially when you're using gouache paint. When you add enough layers, those pencil markings start disappearing very quickly. So I always make sure to do really light passes just so I don't lose those guidelines. And when I don't need them anymore, that's when I really start adding in the really dark colors. Now if you choose to use something like a watered down acrylic, you'll actually lose those guidelines a lot quicker. So do keep that in mind when you're painting. It's all about adding small layers at a time. That'll help give a lot of texture to your drawing. Right here you're going to see I'm just going to take the journal away just to go dry it. And you can use something like a heat gun. I'm just using a hairdryer. That works just as well. Right here it's going to be my second pass for the weathering. And again, it's all about adding those layers. And don't be too concerned what it looks like when it's wet. When it dries, it's going to be significantly lighter. And because I haven't done it in a while, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of white markings here and there. And of course on top of the drawings itself. This will just help separate it from that page. For the title part, I'm going to be using a brush pen, and that'll give you a nice smooth look. For the symbol on top, I'm just going to be using a red pen.
That's 100% gonna bleed. Good thing I don't have to fix it.
And the reason I'm using a red pen is because I know that that's going to be able to smear really well. That way it gives the illusion of it being a little bit older than what it actually is. Of course this is going to have its drawbacks, and it's going to bleed over to the next page.
Oh, whoa, that's really not good. And it bled on 2 pages.
But this page was lacking in weathering, so this kind of works out. And so whenever I do any of the cleanups, I use acrylic because it goes over everything. If you try to use something like a gouache paint, watercolors, you'll end up seeing the color still peeking through. So you need something that's much more opaque. If you don't know what the word opaque means, it just means something more solid. So you'll have your 2 terminologies, opaque and transparent. And transparent's kind of self-explanatory. In the correction spot here, I was a little heavy-handed with some of that weathering, which I think is going to be okay. It still kind of works out. It's nothing that I'm too worried about.
Now we're starting to look professional. Look, we got key lights and everything in here now.
So I've been spending way too much time on Instagram, and I started realizing that if I'm really going to take these videos more serious, that I'll actually need to start having proper lighting in this room. Originally, I only had 2 little lights. I had a little salt lamp and like a little small desk lamp, and it was working out to a certain degree. It was really difficult for me to see in the room, but when I edited the video, it would look really nice. Now the problem with that is I was really straining my eyes the whole time, and it was difficult for me to see what I was working on. So to correct that issue, I turned on the big overhead light above me, but then I would have really harsh shadows on top of my journal, which is fine at the time, but after watching a few videos, I realized I can make it look a lot nicer. Now I didn't go buy any special type of lights, I just got a bunch of lamps that I had around the house and tried my best to set it up in a way where it looked a little more professional. So I hope the color change isn't too much of a distraction, because I actually kind of like the more warm tone look to it. I feel like it looks a little more inviting. It does make the room significantly warmer though, but it kind of works out just because it is winter and I refuse to turn on the heater. So here I'm just going to be using the Uni pen. I'm finding that it's one of the best pens right now to use because no matter how much water you throw on top of it, it never bleeds afterwards.
I didn't even know we had this.
And I'm thinking for this right here, because the page next to it, the leprechaun drawing, has like these little sparkles, and to me I feel like that would be some type of glitter. So I was thinking I could add just a little bit to the page, nothing too overbearing, but just a little smear of glitter here and there. For the first page right there, the leprechaun, I'll add very little bit, and then I'll add a few more drops onto the other side. Now this one right here is a much more trust the process type of drawing, because the majority of it did feel kind of silly and it didn't look like it was going to pan out all that well. So sometimes you just need to actually just finish the drawing before you can judge it. It's very easy to dismiss a drawing, especially when it's really early on, but seeing as I already don't have enough pages for this journal, I really can't sacrifice pages. It's around this time when I noticed why the drawing probably just doesn't look right to me, and it's probably because the background doesn't match the drawing. After adding the first layer of weathering, I immediately noticed that yes, it was just that. The reason my drawing was looking off was because the background was significantly lighter, and I find it looks a little bit nicer if the background has a more mid-tone to it to complement the colors of the actual drawing itself. And so now that I realize that that was my issue, I can continue with the actual drawing itself. And right here, I'm going to be using a number 8 pen, and that's just going to be doing all the outlines. Now, of course, 8 pen isn't thick enough, so I'm going to be going over it a couple times just to add a variety of line weight to the drawing. Keeping everything the same thickness kind of looks a little dull after a while, and I've seen it work in different occasions, but I personally like to add a little bit of variety to it. Now, for all the lines inside the mane and the tail, I'm going to be using a number 1 pen. For this part, I'm using a flicking motion and keeping that center untouched. This will help give an illusion to like a sheen look. For those sparkles on top, I'm thinking if I add just a little bit of a white acrylic streak to it, I can really get a nice effect on that. I want to keep that really subtle because I don't want to take away from the actual drawing itself. The point of these highlights are to complement the drawing itself, but not to overtake it. And right here, I'm just going to be adding a couple extra highlights to the tail and touching up any little line work that I might have missed, or that I might have gone over with the white acrylic. Now in the actual drawing, it almost looks like it has a double shadow, so I'm going to be adding a second one on top of this one right here. And I do have to be careful here, because if you let 2 layers of gouache paint sit on top of each other, especially if one of them's wet, you'll accidentally have them bleed onto each other. So after adding that second layer, I have to immediately hit it with the hairdryer. This will just lock in any of those changes, without affecting any previous layers. Now as far as those gold coins down there, and I'm using the word gold loosely because they're made of plastic, the drawing itself has just a single color on top of itself. So to keep it very similar to that 4-leaf clover on the opposite side, just a little bit of highlights and 2 tones will be all that I need. And because I haven't used the red Sharpie in a while, I'm going to go ahead and use it on this spot. The drawings are really small, so I can't risk having this bleed or smear in the future. They're very small, intricate designs, and that can be easily lost if they smear. Now on camera that looks more brown, but it is a more red in real life. It's just not as vibrant as that pen red, which is a good thing because it just gives a variety of colors. So right here, I'm just using a regular pen to write out everything. And I did run into one mistake right here. I actually made that drawing a little too close and I didn't give myself enough room, which can be easily remedied. I'm just going to use a little bit of acrylic and I'm going to push it over just a little bit. Now it's not supposed to be so close to the edge of the page, but I think it's going to be okay here. It's not too much of an important detail. And the idea is still there, so I think it's okay. So now that that part's fixed up, let's go ahead and finish off writing everything in here. And then after we write out everything, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of that glitter. And this part of the page is going to have a lot more sitting on it. Almost as if he got really close and some of that glitter just sprinkled onto the page. And just to knock it back down, I'm going to add a little bit of extra weathering on top of it. This will just help make it look a little more subtle and not so prominent on the actual page itself. Now it's difficult to see and it's really only visible in real life, but when you move the page around, it does have a little bit of a sheen to that bottom page. Just a small detail that only the reader will see.
So I've seen a few good guesses already, but I think you guys are overthinking it. All the clues I gave you led up to the ring. That's clue 1 through 3. Number 4 has to do specifically with this ring right here. You have to find the bird using the ring. Also, I just got tagged in this really cool Journal 2 recreation from Coral GT. It came out amazing. If anyone else wants to tag me in some stuff, by all means. I'll always try my best to look at everything.
A tour of this room?
It's not even a room, it's just a closet.
Okay, so we're going to be drawing a duck today. Stomach face duck. Let's go ahead and put down our mug. And you'd be surprised at how many mugs I have. And surprisingly, I haven't bought a single one of those. Every single one of them has been gifted to me in one way or another. Let's go ahead and grab some fresh water, and now we're good to go. Let's throw in a sketch so that we have good guidelines for painting. Little mistake right there, but we can work around that. I've noticed this paper doesn't really let you erase. Just a few erase marks and it feels like the paper is already disintegrating. So do keep that in mind when you use this journal. For anyone wondering what gouache paints I'm using, specifically the colors, I'm going to show them on the screen right here. These are the exact colors I'm using. I kind of mix yellow with that brown to try to get more of that coffee look. Because unfortunately, even though the coffee is the best looking one, it has the drawback of not being able to accept UV paint. I had saw a comment of someone mentioning that it was acidic and because of that, the UV paint was never going to take, regardless of what pen I try to use. But I think as long as we get something that's 80% close, we can get away with it. And it'll still have like that coffee soaked stain look. So now that I've added my second layer of weathering, I'm going to go ahead and start adding all the highlights to the drawing. Now the reason I add these highlights is just to give it a little extra separation from the page. Otherwise that drawing is just going to blend in way too much with that background. Now if that's the look that you want to go with, by all means go for it. But me personally, I like to have that separation. This is also why I have a much thicker line weight around my drawing, because that also adds a layer of separation. Now when I look at the example for this one, the drawing looks really sketched out. But I don't want to use a regular pen for this one. The drawing is going to be much more detailed, so you do need to use those art pens. But I want to include all those little hatch lines that's going on, so I can come back with a thinner art pen and just kind of mess up those outlines a little bit. This will still give that illusion of a really quick sketch, while keeping the integrity of the drawing. So going over it one more time with a little bit of gouache paint and a little extra highlights from a white acrylic will help make that drawing pop a little bit more. And I only really have to focus on that duck drawing. You ever wonder what the other guy's working on? You know, the one you guys call Far Away Birdo?
Okay, so we're gonna teach you how to make some toast here. That's where I'm such a secret chef. I know everything. Gonna add some jelly. That's pretty good taste. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's toast. Yeah.
So I'm usually not able to finish a drawing in a single sitting, just because of my time restraint. So today's a new day. Let's go ahead and start off with the little feather, draw on the little cracker. And I'm just going to add a little bit extra shading right here on this one, just adding a little gouache behind the drawing. And because I lost some color, I'm going to add a little bit of orange on top of it. And don't be afraid to add extra color on top of your drawing. Remember, this is supposed to look old, so it's okay if it has stains on top of the drawing. As far as this part of the drawing right here, I think this is just some kind of bird whistle. It's called a duck call, at least on the page. But I've never seen one of these in real life, so someone correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm going to try to round this out just a little bit. I'm not trying to do too much on this one, but I want to give the illusion of it kind of having that curved look. Let's go ahead and add the little symbols down here. And then to anything that I see missing, I'm just going to add a little bit of touch-ups, especially behind that cracker and then a little bit in that center feather. On the prior page, we had symbols that are very similar to this page. And on that page, I used a red Sharpie. So this one, I'm also going to keep that continuity, add a little bit of red Sharpie, follow it up with that regular pen. Now I can go ahead and start adding all the text. Let's go ahead and add the one underneath the feather and the one underneath the cracker. Now, because the drawing does look a little more on the sketched out side, for the title, I'm going to have it also have that sketched out look, opposed to having a nice brush pen on this page. I didn't leave myself much room right here, so I am going to have to write really small on this page, which is going to work out fine. Ended up having extra room at the bottom anyways. Going to be adding a little bit of paint splatter just so it looks a little messier, just a little bit of that smudged ink, and I'm just going to touch up those shadows one more time. And now to go move on to the UV part. Now I had really good success with the last page I did with this pen, and I do believe I'm going to have good success this time around as well.
Whoa, how am I holding this light?
The only thing I've noticed is that the UV won't go over anything that's entirely black. But if you look at previous pages, the ink is holding up really well, especially compared to an older page right here, where that's basically non-readable. And again, that UV paint just shows up so nice on this page. And I'm really kicking myself for adding coffee for the previous pages, because those pages will never look as clean as these pages right here.
Me? I'm old. My back hurts. 28. And also the cipher's still kind of up. No one's figured it out yet. So I'll add another clue. The bird is within the ring.